CMAS training. So I'll get this started here. Okay, this is Amy Ward, and I am your District Assessment Coordinator. So we're going to do our annual CMAS training for everyone, and we'll go ahead and get this started. So why are we doing this today? Because I can administer CMAS like a boss by applying the rules and procedures contained in this presentation. So the Test Administrator Manual, hereafter called the TAM. First of all, what does CMAS stand for? It stands for the Colorado Measures of Academic Success. Just as a reminder, there's no more PARC. Colorado pulled out of the PARC consortium, and so now we are going it alone on a Colorado journey for a Colorado test. So that's why it is now CMAS. So stop calling it the PARC test, because it's not. It's the CMAS test. However, just to catch you up, Colorado did for this year purchase all of the test questions from PARC, and so pretty much the test is going to look the same. It will still be administered through the platform called Pearson Access Next, and then after this year, Colorado will start having Colorado educators come together and write questions that will start to be rotated in throughout the assessment over the next couple of years, so that within 3 years, all the questions will be from Colorado educator and no longer from the PARC assessment. So all of the information in this presentation is also found in the Spring 2018 CMAS Test Administrator Manuals. So when you get your manual before spring break, make sure you read it thoroughly and refer to all the checklists, and don't wait till the morning of the assessment to read that. Okay, let's get going. Let's look at our windows just to kind of make sure that you know what tests we actually are administering this year. So first of all, CMAS does Science and Social Studies, and we also have the COALT, which stands for Colorado Alternative. It's for students who have a cognitive disability. The Social Studies test this year is only going to be administered in grade 7. It can't start until April 9th, and it will finish up by the 27th. And it is also, the Social Studies test this year is only at Salida Middle School. For science, we also have CMAS and COALT, and all students in grade 5, 8, and 11 will take that assessment. The windows are the same as social studies, April 9th through the 27th. Then we have CMAS, Math, and ELA, and this year is new. It will only be given in grades 3 through 8. 9th, 10th will now be taking the PSAT. And then you have the COALT, the Colorado Alternative for Math and ELA. Those students will be taking what's called the DLM, or Dynamic Learning Maps, and that is done from April the 2nd through the 27th in Nancy Power's room. She's taking care of that for us this year. Okay, so for math, this is going to be changing probably next year. So 7th and 8th grade math, because the math flexibility was a part of the PARC assessment. This will be probably the last year for this. So 7th graders, if they are in regular 7th grade math, they will be taking 7th grade math test. If they are in Algebra 1 class, they will be taking the Algebra 1 test. In 8th grade, same thing. It just depends on what class they're actually enrolled in. So grade 8, Algebra 1, or Geometry. Next year, because we will no longer be a part of PARC, then the 7th graders will take 7th grade math, 8th graders will take 8th grade math, but we'll see what happens next year. Overview of what is new this year. So for CMAS, Math, ELA, Science, and Social Studies, the Test Administrator Manual is just combined into one. If you have anything that has PARC on it, like if you kept any manual or reference documents from PARC last year, throw those babies away. They may not be used. Only materials with CMAS on it. Out of order testing is not allowed for any content area, including makeup sessions this year, and this will be restricted. Used scratch paper must be returned this year. You'll have an envelope for that, or your school administrator or your school assessment coordinator will take care of that. But I know last year we didn't get all the scratch paper back. Even if it just has their name on it or a picture, keep it. I'll do what I need to do with it, but please do not let that scratch paper be thrown away. All right, also what is new this year from math and ELA? So I've already referenced to this. See, there will be no CMAS testing in the high school besides CMAS Science in 11. Grade 9 now will take PSAT 9, 10 will take PSAT 10, and then there will be SAT for 11th grade. There will be no standalone ELA field tests this year. Yay! And the crowd goes wild. Because last year I know 4th grade had that extra field test unit that we had to do, which was a little frustrating, but that has been removed this year. Also, there are no multimedia items for English language arts tests this year. So that means you don't have to have headphones for all of your kids in ELA, except for, I know some of the schools are electing to have headphones as a noise buffer, and that way students with text-to-speech can still be in the classroom and have their headphones on and not stand out. So for math, grades this year in grades 6 through 8, then all Unit 1, the structure is the same. There's a non-calculator section and a calculator section. Last year it was in different sections and it wasn't all aligned, so it was a little confusing. Updated unit testing times, so all of the unit testing times have been aligned. So in ELA last year, like Unit 1 would be 65 minutes, and the next one would be 90 minutes, and the next one after that would be 110 minutes, and this year they're just all the same time. And then also the math in grades 3 through 5 have gone from 4 units to 3, so they've shortened that. And then the high school unit testing times have been reduced in science, and there is no social studies test yet. Okay, testing schedule. I'm just going to pause here. This is the testing times for elementary. So if you're in math, note all the testing times are the same, all 65 minutes, and they're all non-calculator. In ELA 3 through 5, they are 90-minute sessions, and in science, they are 80-minute sessions. In middle school, ELA, they're all 110 minutes. Social studies are all 80, science all 80 minutes. Math, 3 units, all 65 units, but if you notice that Unit 1 will have a non-calculator section, and then it will have a calculator section. Same goes with Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and Geometry, although we won't have anybody taking Algebra 2 this year. They all are 90 minutes long, and still Unit 1 will have a non-calculator section and a calculator section. And high school science is now only 50 minutes. So some guidelines for the administration time. We have to schedule, so if that test is 110 minutes, then we schedule the entire 110 minutes opportunity. Once the unit testing time is met, you need to end. If you have somebody that says, I'm not done, I'm sorry, they have to submit their test. They're done. A student will only be allowed extended time if they have the accommodation listed in their IEP 504 or ELL plan. If all students complete testing before the unit testing time is met, the unit can be ended. You've scheduled 90 minutes, but let's say everybody in the entire class is done by 70 minutes, then you can end that time because they've submitted it and they can't reopen it anyway. However, if everybody has finished but one student, that student still gets the entire 90 minutes. So those students need to be doing whatever your after testing activity is, whether it's reading. They cannot draw, they cannot play on the computer, they cannot play on their phones. Please do not end that time, in that testing time early if you still have any student testing. And I've already talked about this, but reiterate it, extended time is an accommodation only if it is listed in their IEP 504 or ELL plan. Read plans don't count. MTSS plans don't count, only these 3. Math and ELA, time and a half is not included in the unit time, so those students will have to be in a separate session to get that extended time. In science and social studies, time and a half is actually included in the unit. So if a student just needs that extra time and a half, all students have time and a half, and they can be in the classroom with everyone else. However, if a student needs more than time and a half, let's say a student has written in their IEP 504 or ELL plan that they need double time, then they will need to be in a separate testing environment. Okay, policies. It is our duty to maintain the standardization of these assessments to ensure that a test score in Salida, Colorado means the same thing in Denver. So here's how we do that. We need to make sure that we have students have access to all the materials that they need. We need to follow all the directions and scripts exactly as written, no paraphrasing. There is one exception to that. Move throughout the room during testing. Please don't sit at your desk and grade papers, although I know that quiet time is hard not to do that. Reread. So up here it says follow all directions and scripts exactly as written. The one exception to that is if a student needs you to clarify the test administrator manual say directions, not the directions as it pertains to particular test items. I'm talking about the general administration directions. If a student has a question about those, you can clarify them in your own language. Use proximity to keep students on task, and if you need to redirect a student, please be right there with that student and use the continue working script from the test administrator manual for any off-task behaviors. So here's a long list of things we cannot do, so we're going to go over them very carefully in order to maintain standardization and make sure that we don't engage in any activity that could impact the validity, the reliability, or fairness of a test. So first of all, here we go. Please do not provide feedback or coach students. Do not clarify test questions. Please do not read passages, sources, or test questions to students unless it is part of their IEP and you are in a separate environment. Answer content-related questions, interfere with a student's demonstration of skills, interact with the students in any way that would impact student responses, allow students to communicate with each other in any way or use prohibited materials, engage in other tasks during the test sessions. Please, we've already talked about that. Actively read, view assessment items or content before, during, or after testing, unless you're like giving a sign language test to a student, which we don't have that in our district right now anyway. Actively read, view, or score formally or informally or comment on any student responses unless it's something that is part of their accommodation, which we don't have any of those, so it's a moot point. Leave test materials unsecured. Do not discuss or disclose test content through verbal exchange, email, social media, or any form of communication. Don't be talking about how your students did on a particular question on Facebook. And please do not download any part of the assessment. Okay, let's talk about breaks. Between units, scheduled breaks may occur. So here's an example. During that break, students may not have access to any of their cell phones, which I know they're going to be upset about that, but don't let them. During units, you may do that short stand and stretch break for 3 minutes. It does stop the time for the unit. You cannot go beyond 3 minutes, and it needs to be added into the overall test taking time. If you have students that go to the restroom during the test, unless they have an accommodation that stops the clock, it does not stop the clock. So they need to go to the restroom and get back and still have time to finish their assessment. Makeup testing. So any student who is absent or becomes ill or who cannot, do the test for whatever reason will have to finish that in makeup testing. Students are not allowed to return to any completed portion of the unit, and Pearson Access Next it ensures that doesn't happen. So if that test is paused, that's really shouldn't be a problem if you have the right test unlocked at the right time. Tests in a makeup session, test security and administrative protocols still apply. And all units for all content areas must be administered in order. So if a student misses Unit 1 and they come in the next day and everybody's on Unit 2, that student has to complete Unit 1 before they can move on to Unit 2. Or it is a misadministration. So what are administrative considerations? Some students will get administrative considerations that might change the condition of the testing that could benefit them. So it is available to any student. They don't have to be on any kind of plan as long as the test security protocols are not compromised and all of the test environment requirements stay the same. So what are these administrative considerations? It could be adaptive or specialized equipment or furniture, frequent breaks that do not stop the clock, noise buffers, headphones, small group testing, specified separate or alternative area or seating, anything that's time of day, like students could whisper read to self, but if they do whisper read to self, then they have to be in a completely separate testing environment with a separate testing administrator. Just know that. An emergency accommodations, we can accommodate for students who, break both of their wrists skiing and they can no longer keyboard. We'll figure something out and we can do an emergency accommodation if needed. Chain of custody is very important. We have to document anytime any of those materials, which are mainly now just testing tickets since we no longer do paper-based assessments, but anytime those documents, those materials are moved from one place to another, we have to sign in and out the chain of custody form. So please don't forget to do that. Anytime you receive any materials, you'll sign it out and then you'll sign it back in. You will only receive the content area and grade level being assessed at that time. Let's say in the morning you're doing ELA and in the afternoon you're doing math, then you only get the ELA materials in the morning and only the math materials in the afternoon, and they are separate testing tickets. At the end of the testing session, make sure you return everything, and please do not store those materials in your classroom. While they are in your classroom, though, let's say you've checked them out, you've taken them to your classroom, please do not leave them on a desk while you leave the classroom and there are students there. So even if you're out in the hallway, make sure that those materials are secured. Please do not duplicate any materials. There are no cell phones allowed or other communication or recording devices allowed during testing sessions. Students need to be aware that if they are caught with a cell phone or some kind of electronic device, like even a smartwatch, then that could lead to the invalidation of not only their test, but it could affect actually all the tests in that room. So it's very important that they don't have those things with them, and we're going to list out those things here in just a minute. And at no time should there ever be cameras out, even in the phones, taking pictures of any kind of screens on the test. So what is secure and what is not secure materials? So what is secure that you have to keep locked up and signed for? Those would be testing tickets, any rosters with any student information beside them, any oral scripts, which I don't believe we have any use scratch paper, even if it's just their name or a picture of a flower. Any student work responses. We do have a couple of students who use some assisted technology devices, so we'll have to properly make sure that the responses are no longer on there and dispose of those. Any math reference sheets. So the math reference sheets actually pop up automatically on the screen, but there may be a few students that we print them for, and if they write on them at all, then they become secure. What is non-secure? First of all, that test administrator manual, take that baby home and highlight it and read it and mark it up so that you know exactly which directions you're saying and which directions you're not. Any unused scratch paper, any math reference sheets that are not written on are not secure, and they don't have to be locked up. Headphones. This year, the only reason you have to have headphones is if a student is text-to-speech and in a testing room where there are other students. If a student, let's say, have sensory issues and they can't handle the headphones on and they just want to listen to the test questions being read to them out loud, then they have to be tested in a separate environment. And none of the CMAS assessments have audio anymore unless it's text-to-speech. So if you do have students with text-to-speech, it's probably best if everybody has headphones on for noise buffers, just so those students will actually use the text-to-speech so they don't feel that they are standing out. Room configuration. You just need to make sure, especially since we're using mainly Chromebooks, that the students can't see each other's screens. So whether that's monitors back-to-back, students back-to-back, a semicircle, widely spaced rows, you figure it out, but just make sure that those students can't easily see the screens, and that may also mean that we need to use some kind of dividing screen. Our testing environment needs to just be a nice learning environment like your everyday classroom. Making sure that students have a writing surface and that they have scratch paper and a printed reference sheet if needed. We're not doing that for all of our math students, so there's probably only a few that may need that printed reference sheet. Be free of any electronic devices. Please do not have music playing in the background, and make sure that you have that do not disturb sign on your door while testing. Here are some prohibited materials, electronic materials. So you as the test administrator, you may have your cell phone and you may have it on, but it's only for emergency use only, and it must be silenced, and that also includes no buzzing, vibration noise if that's what you have, so turn that off as well. And here are other electronic devices that are not allowed: e-readers, personal document scanners, electronic pens, smartwatches, iPods, MP3 players, any instructional aids or reference books besides the word-to-word dictionary that a couple of our ELL students are allowed to have. And no food or drinks. If it is a student that needs that for their health plan, then it should not be right there next to the computer. So let's talk about what is on your walls. You need to make sure that any visual aids that could provide possible answers to students need to be removed, such as number lines, word walls, steps for solving math equations, maps, charts, models, any other content-related materials, or any resource that defines, explains, or illustrates terminology or concepts. And if you're not sure, if you're in doubt, cover it up or take it down. You also want to make sure that students have clearly know what test they're taking, which unit they're on, how many minutes that the test is, when it started, and when it ends. And if you are doing the 3 minutes stand and stretch break, add that 3 minutes in. We want to make sure that no one is going into your classroom doing the assessment except for school personnel and test administrators. No media at all should be allowed to have access to any of our students during testing. No pictures, no videos, or nothing like that. And parent helpers and volunteers should not be in the classroom during the assessment. If there is any kind of security breach or just anything you feel uncomfortable about, let your school assessment coordinator know, and then they will then talk to me. Safety threats and weather, I just want to put, I think there should be a number 1 here that says keep students safe. That should be first before any of these things. That's the caveat. So if there is something going on, it says number 1, note the time of the disruption and the time remaining in the unit. And I'm saying, yes, that's important, but keep kids safe first. And if that means everybody needs to leave in a hurry, then everybody leaves in a hurry. Number 2, secure test materials according to our security plan. Caveat, keep students safe first. Number 3, upon return, prepare students for the continuation of the unit and resume test only if students feel safe enough to return to the assessments. And number 4, document the situation in writing. And we'll take care of that if needed. So before testing tasks, some things that we need to do is we need to make sure that our students have access to all the tutorials and practice tests. So those are coming out. Make sure you walk through those with your students, and for ELA and math, or the EPATs for science and social studies, so that students know the format of the test and nothing is a surprise to them, because we can help them log in, we can help them log out, but we cannot help them how to move, how to help answer a question, or show them how to get to the next question, or we can't help them use the review screen or the drag and drop feature. So they need to do those practice test items and tutorials first, so that they know how to access and navigate through the assessment, because we are not allowed to help them do that. And if we have students that let's say have text to speech, then they need to do the practice items with text to speech. So once you get the link to the student practice tests, here is what it looks like. It will say social studies, science, ELA, and math, and it will have grade levels down the side, and then it will just have like the plain like computer-based practice test environment. This is for pretty much everybody. If they have text to speech, they need to do the text to speech version, and I can't remember if we have any students doing the Spanish one. Maybe once, no, not even one at the high school for science. Then they would practice there. So when you log into Pearson Access Next and you see your students, you will have a separate list of all the students with accommodations, and you need to make sure before you start that test and you see your list of students, you need to see, like if you have 3 students with text to speech, they should have TTS next to their name. If they don't, you need to let your school assessment coordinator know before you start that test, because once you start that test, now it's a misadministration. And so all that needs to be changed, and we're going to do our best to make sure that we see those prior to testing. But it will also be your responsibility to make sure, and text to speech is probably the one, the accommodation most likely to be maybe misidentified. Okay, you can only have access to the materials on the day of the test. You're going to check them out, you're going to administer the assessment, and then you're going to check them back in. You can't remove any of those materials from the campus. They can never be left unattended, and they need to be secured while they're in your possession. At least 1 week ahead of time, please, please, please read that manual. Again, don't wait till the morning of. And you will need to sign the security agreement that your school assessment coordinator will be bringing around to you in doing their small group training, which is mostly your counselors, except at HEA and CREST, where it is the principal. You will need to be prepared to administer any accommodated test if that applies to you, and you need to make sure that you can log into your Pearson Access Next account. And don't wait till the morning before to do that. On the day before, make sure that you prepare your testing environment, get all your desks ready to cover your walls, all of that good stuff if needed. Make sure you have the directions available, and please make sure that you know everything about that assessment. You know what, when, where testing will take place, because that's when we get into trouble, when you're not 100% sure what you're supposed to do. And make sure you arrange for any materials that you may need, like scratch paper or calculators. Your school assessment coordinators are on that, though. They will make sure you have what you need. During testing, on the day of testing, you will receive your test materials and any headphones or anything you need for text-to-speech. You need to make sure that you know how to manage your test sessions in Pearson Access Next. You will read the appropriate SAY directions from the TAM. You will distribute your test materials. You can help your students log in. You need to keep and monitor the time. You need to supervise and monitor test activity using proximity. You will provide the 30-minute stand and stretch break, and you will report anything that is a little off to your school assessment coordinator. After testing, make sure that you return everything. Here are your resources. So in order to log in, you would go to co.pearsonaccessnext.com and see if you can still log in. Your school assessment coordinator will help you do that. On that landing page, there are some student and educator resources if you need it, but probably you're just going to log in and go to your testing sessions. If you do need any support, just make sure you contact your school assessment coordinator, which is your counselor, or Talmadge and Jill at the two other schools. Then they will contact me as the district assessment coordinator, and then I'll contact CDE if needed. If students submit their test early, then we can't reopen them at all, and so that's why it is so important to monitor your students pretty closely so that you know where they are. There are some students that will go through the test and just go straight to the end and try to submit their test, and then they'll say, oh, well, the computer kicked me out and now it's saying I'm completed. Once that happens, there's really not much we can do about it. That you will sign the security agreement form with your SAC. Make sure that does happen. And the last thing is, at the end of this testing session, Colorado, like I said at the very beginning, will have Colorado educators come together and start thinking about the test questions for ELA, math, and I believe science and social studies. And if you are interested in being a part of that Colorado educator pool for assessment development, which I highly recommend, it is very useful and helpful, then you may want to go to this website, pearson.cvent.com/Colorado Educator Database, and get involved. And so hopefully with now knowing these rules and procedures, you can administer the CMAS assessment like a boss, and your school assessment coordinator will be coming around doing small group work on actual Pearson Access Next and anything that is specific to your school. So thank you.